Marty, thank you so much for joining us today and being willing to be our first person. We have such a short time to spend with you, so if you don't mind, we'll just start right away, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Marty, you've told me in the past about your life in Czechoslovakia as a child right before the war. Before we turn to the war and the Holocaust, tell our audience what life was like for you and your family in the years before the war.
Okay, I'll start with that. In the 1930s, when I was growing up, I was born in 29, so when I went to school, I went to Czech school. Now, I'll make a big distinction from Czechs to what was to come later. Under Czechs, we had democracy. And the school I went to was very nice, very similar to the United States, actually. The teachers were similar as well. And the teachers were mostly from the Czech Republic, and they were, there were some men, some women. And most of all, I never realized as a kid, I shouldn't say I didn't realize, by the time I was 7, 8 years old, I knew about democracy as much as anybody. Because we were explained that in school, and the way the teachers behaved, they were all very civilized and all that, you know, like, when I say civilized, all teachers are civilized, but, you know, I'm talking about, they were just nice. And the reason I say this, it was very, where we lived, it was not exactly the norm. One of the reasons was because there were Russian, the population where we lived were primarily Russian, or Russian speaking, not like Russian from the Russia itself, but they were Russian nevertheless. And their culture and their religion was similar to the one in Russia, okay? So their language was similar, but not quite the same, a little different. So I grew up speaking Russian from the time I was a kid. You know, I remember when I first started. I just knew Russian. But I went to Czech school. And the Czech schools were different than the Russian schools. The rest of the kids went to Russian school. There, the schools were very archaic. The teachers were very stern and walk around with a rod in their hand. And they believed in corporal punishment and all kinds of stuff like this. Very similar, I hate to say it out loud, but I have friends that are Catholic. They just tell me that's what their nuns used to do or whatever. And I used to get a kick out of that because it was very similar. Anyway, but we were brought up very good that way. And like I say, by the time I was in 7, 8 years old, I was very aware of the democracy. And one of the things that I had all these benefits, I came from a family of 9 children, okay? I had 4 brothers, there were 4 boys and 5 girls. All of them were older than I was, except I had 2 younger sisters than I was. But the rest of them, they were older. And they were not just a little older, they were quite a bit older. And they were already out in the world, and I had one sister who was going to school in the city, which was most unusual. Nobody went to school in the city, like college, what they call a gymnasium. But anyway, so we had, and not only that, but our family was more, we also had a benefit. I also had a benefit. We had a summer resort in our town, a nice one, even by today's standards. And so we had a lot of visitors come during the summer. And believe it or not, as a kid, all this sort of, you automatically pick it up without realizing. So I was more or less not, even though I lived in a village, but I was not so naive. You know, I was like really, I knew what the world was about, okay? And so this was my introduction to, you know, when I was a kid. Anyway, as time went on, in 1937, 38, Hitler started getting on a soapbox and he started screaming about Germany, über alles, which is Germany over everybody or something like this. And he came in like an always, because they were beaten down from World War I. So he was really very angry. And by the way, we had depression in the United States, but there it was much worse. They had really, people were jobless. The economy, there was no economy, it was just a shambles. That people, the mothers had to take the child and stand in soup line.
Hey, Marty, I'm going to interrupt for just a second. Do you have your cell phone in your pocket by any chance? Let's take that out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we're going to turn that off.
I have it off.
You have it off?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it off.
All right, well then.
Yeah, I have it off.
Can you just take it out and put it on the table?
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Marty. I think that's causing the problem. Okay.
It's causing a problem?
Yeah, it's a sound. That's okay. Marty, before we continue on, your father, Jacob, your mother, Golda, tell us a little bit about them.
Well, okay, my father was in those days, I guess most of the men were stern. He was a father, period. We all had highest respect for him. He had his own chair. And when he said something, that was gospel, that's it. And my older brothers, of course, had to do all the work. By the way, my father had a business, and we also had our own land, so we grew our own food and so on. So we had a lot of farming to do, and we also had the business to run. So my older brothers, they were strong, big guys, and they were capable of doing this. So they were doing everything. Then during the certain seasons when there was extra work or something, we would hire some peasants, and they would do some digging potatoes and that kind of stuff. But the point was, our lives actually, even now that I'm got older, and I thought we were just ordinary people, and we were ordinary people getting by. But when once I came to the United States, and I kept on hearing about the Depression and all, in the 1930s, we lived very well. We had everything we needed. We didn't have any shortage. Even during the war, we had enough of our own food that we didn't have to worry about food and so on. So we were very self-sufficient, to say the least. And like I said, my brothers were very capable. They were strong, big guys. But as they got older, my two oldest brothers left for the city. They wanted to make their own money, make their own living. And I had one brother home. He was the closest to me. He was about 7 years older than I was. But he, too, was very capable. So consequently, by now already, I was about 12 years old or so. So I was his helper from 10. By the time I was 10, I was already helping him. We used to plow the fields ourselves, all kind of stuff. It was a given. But my father was very firm, but obviously he knew how to manage everything, because everything worked. And this went on for a good time. But anyway, 1939, when the war broke out, we were occupied by Hungary. Now, I noticed Hungary, not Germany. Now, one of the reasons is people always blame everything on Germans, which, by the way, they deserve it, because they were the one that started the whole thing. But they had allies. They had, like Romania, Hungary. There were a bunch of others, which I can't even remember the names of them anymore. But anyway, there were quite a few of them. And Hungary got our section. That was their prize for going to, joining the Nazis. As soon as they came in, we knew we were in big trouble. But my father said there's nothing to be afraid, because he was in a Hungarian army during World War I. So he says, they are anti-Semitic and all that, but, they're okay. Well, it turned out he was wrong. This was a different Hungary. They were already infected with the Nazi ideology, and they came in. As soon as they came in, they changed they deprived us of our, not necessarily technically, our citizenship. However, they took away all our rights. We had no rights. They took away the businesses from the Jewish people. They took away their livelihoods. If you were a teacher, you couldn't teach. If you my sister was going to school, they sent her home. She couldn't stay in school, and so on. So our life was changing immediately.
Marty, one of the things that the way you put it to me, besides all the things that you were prohibited from doing, you said that whatever you had done that you did legally was now illegal.
Illegal, right. So guess what? We lived in a small town. We didn't have electricity, by the way. So we had, but the only thing we had kerosene lamps, like you do, like lantern, or candles. And my father's business was in the meat business. Now, we had slaughtered animals. So we had a small slaughterhouse, like fixed up, but we were not that active. We just had a certain amount for the week. And before we used to do it legally and all that. And now they took away our capability of doing that, but we still had to supply the population. They were used to getting the stuff from us.
So it was illegal to do that, but you had to do it.
Exactly, but we still had the business. The funny thing is most of the business were taken away from them. Their licenses were taken away. Somehow my father, they didn't take away. I could never understand why. I don't know if he bribed somebody or what, because they were bribable. But the point is that I don't know. The fact is we had to do everything at night. So my brother, like I say, he was very strong and capable. So we used to take the animals, literally, I hate to sound so vivid, and during the night, that by the way, our neighbors were Russian, they didn't like the Hungarians any more than we did, because the Hungarians looked at them as inferior, because they were Slavic. But what happened is that because we just couldn't trust them, even though you're own neighbors. During wartime, you'd be surprised how differently life is, that people change, or they can change. So we were very careful of doing that. So we had to do everything during the night. So my father would buy the cattle, and we would have to slaughter it believe it or not, in a stable. So nobody see us. Nobody would see us in the dark. All we had was candles or one of those lanterns. And we did all that work by candlelight on the floor. We didn't have a way to hoist up to make it easier or anything like this, nothing. Mm-hmm. And this is the way we worked, but we did what we had to do. And because we were always under surveillance, if you will, so we had to get rid of all the evidence by morning. So nothing is, yet we didn't have any cars, you have to remember. We had bicycles and we had a horse and wagon, that's it. So it was not as easy as get in a car and do something.
But you had to hide the evidence of whatever.
We had to hide the evidence. So but then somebody, if the police surprised us, they would come, they wouldn't find any evidence of it, okay? And by the way, and they used to do that. They used to send sometimes detectives, and they would sort of like watch for us. And of course, we were always afraid that one of the neighbors will inform, okay? We just were at a point where we could not trust anybody. Yeah.
Marty, I'm going to ask you about, two of your brothers were of draft age. Yeah. Tell us what happened to them.
My two oldest brothers were actually taken away. Well, actually, one of them was taken away by as early as 1940. He was the only one at the time that was taken away. And, but the rest of them were about 41. They inducted all the men from anywhere from 20 to about 50 into the service, but not the army. But they were under military rule, but they were civilian clothes, and they had regular shoes, like regular boots. But they used them, guess what? They used them for slave labor. We call them, I didn't know what to coin them after the war, so I call them labor battalions. So my oldest brother was immediately sent out to the Russian front. And that was the worst place to be, not only for him or for people like him, but even the German troops, for punishment, they used to send him to the Russian front. That's how terrible life was there. It was cold, miserable, everything. There was typhoid going around and all kinds of diseases. And my brother was there from as early as 1940, and just to cut through the chase, he was, finally he got over to the Russian side. Later on, he was on the Russian front. And by the way, you know what they had him do on the Russian front? Burying the dead and picking minefields. But he survived. But we lost contact with him. We had no idea where he was. Everybody else we knew was with somebody. They knew somebody that was with him. They saw him someplace. Nobody saw him. And he was in those places. Finally, what do you call it, just to finish the thought, he got over to the Russian side. And in Russia, what they had, they just set up a Czechoslovakian Legion, which, by the way, one of my second cousins was one of the people that did that with another general. And they set up a Czechoslovakian Legion. So all these guys that escaped or they were captured by the Russians, They came on the other side, they put on a Czech uniform, they got a gun, and they started fighting the war to finish it. But my brother, he wasn't so lucky. He came there, and they accused him of being a German spy. Why? I don't know, till this day. But, so they...
What did they do to him after they accused him?
They accused him of being a German spy, so they put him in with the German POWs. Okay, he was not German, he didn't even speak German. So he was there.
In fact, they were responsible for sending him off as a slave laborer.
A slave laborer, and with the POWs, the German POWs. Now, 47, now, by the way, we gave up. We didn't think he was alive anymore because nobody was with him, nobody heard of him. We just gave up. I was already in the United States, actually. But anyway, in 47, all of a sudden, there was, we heard that he was alive. I couldn't believe it. It turned out that he was that's when I found out he was treated as a German POW. Now, the Russians kept the German POWs 2 years after the war, okay? And he was in one of those groups. So 2 years after the war, they released him, 47.
All that time, treating him like a German POW.
He was a Russian POW.
Russian POW.
But now, before he was a German, but now he was a Russian, okay? Or Hungarian, if you will. But now he is a Russian POW. I mean, they treat him as a German, let's put it this way. And he was there for a number of years. Finally, they released him in 47. And that's the first time somehow he made his way through, but he was smart enough to know that not to let anybody know where he is or where he's going. He just kept on moving. He came out to our town, he saw nobody was there, he kept on moving. And he made sure nobody, because they would see the Russians they had a secret police, they called the NKVD at the time. They were very, very nasty. They were not dissimilar to the SS in many cases, but they were very thorough. And the slightest thing, they would arrest you and put you in prison forever, you know, whatever. And that's the way they were. So he kept on moving. But anyway, again, cut to the chase. Somehow he got over to Slovakia. And from there, he found by that time, somebody told him where my brother was. My older brother was still in the Czech Republic. So he got in touch with him. He immediately sent one of his, actually a young sister-in-law, with some papers and some clothes and so on. And she brought him over to where he was. And he stayed in the Czech Republic. There he was safe. However, he couldn't even though he was also, ordinarily he was a Czechoslovakian citizen originally, but they wouldn't recognize it, okay? So he picked up, guess what? I was already gone to the States. Somebody for a couple of bucks, they got my birth certificate, my birth information from the not the State Department, but the Interior Department. And he ended up with my name and my birthday. He was like about 10 years older than I was.
Marty, during you and your family, of course, remained in Hungary under the circumstances you were describing until 1944. How were you able to manage to, under those circumstances, surviving, be able to eat for that period of time, for those almost 5 years?
As long as we were home, we were fine.
As long as you were home,
as long as we were home, we were fine. As a matter of fact, we had many people, they were on a run from Poland, from that area, because of escaping from massacres and stuff. And they would come through, we would always make sure we helped them.
Yeah. You told me that by 1944, you just knew that sooner or later you were going to be arrested. Did your family do anything to prepare for that?
You couldn't prepare, you couldn't do anything. It's not like people always in the United States don't understand that. We didn't have the means, we didn't have the capability of going anyplace. No country would allow you in, okay, if you did get there. If you went to Switzerland, the borders were closed if you were Jewish, period. If you went to any country, even France in the early days, Although France got to be very bad too later, because the same thing happened in France as in Hungary. But the point is that there was there was nothing you could do. You were literally, plus you had a family. Whom do you leave? You leave your children behind? You were thinking of going to the forest and do it. But we lived in an area that was mountainous. There was no food there except forests. And so my father and my older brother, we were thinking of going, the three of us, just going to the forest. Then you leave your family there helpless. Your women and children. Mm-hmm. So what do you do? Right. Decided not to go.
Marty, we're having some technical problems, I think, and I think your microphone. Can you hear Marty well when he speaks? No. Okay.
No? I'll take it out.
Okay.
You hear me now? No.
They'll work on it from upstairs, so we'll.
Okay.
Here we go. Thank you.
I thought you guys could hear me.
It just cut off a moment ago, Marty. Yeah.
I had better.
Yeah, Marty. I had asked you at one point, had the family considered going into hiding? And one of the things you said is there were still a large number of you at home with young kids, and where would you go hide?
Exactly.
Right.
There's no place to hide.
No place to hide.
First of all, in a case like this, you know, we got along with our neighbors. They were all practical purposes. They were ordinary, good people. We were not enemies, but we could not trust them. We may have trusted that one person that would do it. However, we didn't trust the neighbor next to him. We never knew. In other words, and I think we were probably right, okay? Mm-hmm. And one thing we didn't want to do is separate, like the children would be left alone. Or my mother.
Right.
So we made these calculations, but eventually we decided not to do it, you know. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so there came after a certain time, and by the way, by that time already we heard of the massacres in the Ukraine, big massacres from different areas, the whole eastern area, and that was not far from us. And we were very aware of it. And like I think I did mention before, about Slovakia, did I? Yeah.
You and I were talking about that earlier,
right,
yeah.
And so we knew about all this. It wasn't like we were in the dark. But now, again, we didn't have any newspapers, no radio, nothing of that stuff. We just knew it. Yeah. And so we were already prepared for anything. Mm-hmm. However, you were never prepared for what came later with Auschwitz. Okay, that was something nobody could have ever thought of.
Well, Marty, let's turn. I'm going to talk loud. Can most of you hear that? Okay. That I have no problem, according to my kids. So, Marty, in 1944, your family was forced into the ghetto, but you weren't there very long. Forced to the ghetto, and then what happened after that?
Yeah,
you can hold that, leave that down. You got a microphone right here.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. The microphone is here.
Yeah, there you go.
In 1944, actually, they arrested us. face to face the Gestapo. They were in charge. However, the guards were Hungarian. Okay, and the Hungarians were the Red Cross, not the Germans. So I have to give it.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
You're wearing out our microphones.
Yeah.
Okay.
So most of the things I have to, give credit to the Hungarians first, because because they are the one that ruined us. They are the one that initially picked us up. Now, once we were in the ghetto, we realized we were in big trouble. However, we had no idea. Now, we heard of all the atrocities by now in the Ukraine and all that. We heard all that, so we were prepared. You're prepared, but you're never prepared, okay? I can't explain it. When somebody's going to kill you, you hear about it, and you figure that's inevitable, but you figure it wouldn't happen to you. It happened to somebody else. It's just the way life is, you know. And, but we were there a short time. One day, we got orders that we are going on a trip. They pulled up a big train, and one of those with, cattle cars, and they stacked us into they pushed us into the train. In our boxcar, we had 125 people in the boxcar. Can you imagine? One boxcar with bundles, and everybody had bundles. People were very old, because in Europe, people a certain age were very old. And they were also very young ones, a lot of children, because our population in our area, everybody had anywhere from 3 to 14 kids. So you had grown-up people, but you also had a lot of people under 10, or under 3. And so anyway, so they pushed us into these boxcars. And by that time, and by the way, I don't even remember if we got any food there. Somehow or another, we survived there. But when we got into the boxcars, and the first thing, some boxcars had 125 to 135. And I still, with hindsight, I still remember certain things. As the train started moving, we came to Poland, and we realized we were going eastward. And that scared us, because we had heard of the massacres in Ukraine, we heard of different things that happened in that area, and we figured we were in for it. But we knew that from the start. But you never knew what was to come. I mean, you just could not visualize it. That people you heard of the mass killings with the Einsatzgruppen, this is the machine guns and stuff. But it happened to somebody else. It wouldn't happen to you. I can't explain it. It's a defensive mechanism or whatever. And so we went, like I said, we're traveling on a train, and we came to Poland. That really shook us up. But we realized that was not all. By the way, no food, no water, nothing. And when the train stopped at the station to fill up water for the locomotive, guess what? We were crying for water. Nobody would give us a drop of water. Okay? We kept on going. And we came, in my case, we came during the night. We came into Auschwitz at like around midnight, I think. And once we came into Auschwitz, to describe the scene is almost beyond description, because you just can't. The train stopped, and as soon as it stopped, we started getting orders in German. Of course, so we understood a little bit, because we spoke Jewish, and some Jewish in German have the same words, but not the same pronouncement. So we understand something, but most of it we didn't understand, because that was in German, and it was real German. And we got off the train, and the first thing, some guys came up with the striped clothes, the prison clothes. Now, we didn't know who they were, and they acted mean. They had big sticks, like broomsticks, and they threatened you to hit you. And we tried not to get hit, of course. And like I said, we were on the ground, but most of all, as soon as we were on the ground, they had, the area, the perimeter was circled with floodlights, like at a football field. And there were guards all around us. As soon as we were on the ground, there were guards all around us. And literally the finger on the trigger. And they were just, every 5-6 feet there was a guard. And that was our arrival at Auschwitz. Well, if I was to describe hell, sometimes you think of hell as being a terrible place. Well, hell wouldn't even compare. As we were on the ground for a very short time, in the meantime, not only were the guards with their rifles, with their finger on the trigger, but there's those nasty, trained killing dogs, those German police dogs. If you ever saw one, you really have to hold them back, not to jump at somebody. They're just trained for that, automatically. And they were right behind the guards. And this was our how can I put it, our arrival at Auschwitz. And immediately, right after we were on the ground, they separated us immediately, the men from the women. So the men went on one side, the women went on the other side. And when we're already in a group of men and a group of women, each one of us had to go through a line, like a goose fashion, and there was an officer standing with dressed up. One thing about the Germans, they were dressed very sharp, very neat, like out of a Hollywood movie, like really very spit and span, and with shiny boots. And he would just stand there like this here, and you would march up to him, he would go like this and like that. Now we figured out that one of the reasons they do that, they pick people to work or not to work. And by the way, on the train, we've speculated that because we will work, so our families will be taken care of because we'll be earning enough for them as well. So this was our logic, because we're ordinary people, right? Well, it turned out that was far from the truth. That was not at all what it was. So we went through the line, the men, like I said, the men, the women, and anybody went to the left went immediately to the gas chambers. Anybody to the right was picked for work. Now, of course, we didn't know that. You have to remember, we were literally like the blind leading the blind. We just had no idea. I mean, we knew we were in trouble, but we didn't expect what was to come. As soon as we were in these groups, we went through the line and we were picked. They put us in another group, the one that were picked for work, and the one that were picked not to go to work, they were put on a different line, a different bundle, or a different group, I should say. And they immediately marched them off to the gas chambers. By next morning, they were all gone. They were all killed, okay? When we came to Auschwitz, the killing rate was 10,000 to 12,000 people a day, okay? Now, I'll tell you also about the train, which I should have mentioned before. The train, because it was a long train that we were on, there were so many people in each boxcar, and our train, I remember, had 125 boxcars. Now, how do I know that? I'll tell you what, I was a kid. When the train went on a curve, I used to count them.
Marty, when the selection took place, tell us about your family.
Yeah, so the election took place, so like I said, my mother and my younger sisters obviously went right straight to that section to go to the gas chamber. But I had two older sisters, they were picked for work. So I didn't know that, of course. And the same thing with me. I went through and I passed through, my father went through, my brother, and they were big, and I went through them and I passed. But one thing that may have saved me, I'm not sure. Now, in the spring of the year, in that area, like where we live too, it's still cold. So I had a couple of extra jackets, like outdoor jackets on the train. I put them on because we're in cold climate, we'll need the jackets, right? So I put extra jackets on. And I put those extra jackets on, and that may have saved me, because I was not a big kid. I was like 14, just about 15. But I was not big. I was definitely not big for my age. I was not short, but I was not big. So, but I went through. Now, I didn't know that was such a big deal. I found out later that a lot of the kids I went to school with did not come through, okay? So this is only learned that later. But anyway, they put us into one area as a group, all the men that were picked for work. And then I noticed the women were on the other side, not far, just a short distance across. There was a little empty space. And I noticed my mother was there with my two younger sisters. So I said to my father, you know something? I'm going to run across that space. I'm going to join them because food will be a problem, and I'm a little older than my sisters were. I'll be more capable of getting some food. So I tried to make a dash across. And guess what? When I was halfway there, this man in the striped uniform, which, by the way, we thought they were terrible because they acted nasty. They were other prisoners, but they had to act like that. They had to behave like they were threatening us all the time or hitting us. But they didn't hit us, but they were threatening. But we didn't know that. One of the guys, as I was running over, he grabbed me by the back of my neck and threw me back. You can't go there. And he insisted I go back to where I came from. And guess what? That man just saved my life that moment. Had I gone to that site, I could have never gotten back. Okay, had I been in their group. It just shows you how sometimes luck is very, very important.
Marty, that was, of course, the last time you saw your mother.
Yeah,
and your
right,
sister.
yeah. Right.
And you and your father and your sisters then were forced to go into forced labor.
Right.
Tell us what happened to you from there.
Well, from there, actually, it was, actually, I had an older brother. He was with me. He was very strong. And he got separated right there and then from us. For some reason, there was something happened that he got separated from us. Mm-hmm. I never saw him again. Then he obviously, he was the healthiest, the strongest. He never came back. I did. So you figure it out. From there, they said they put us on a train. They went to Austria, and we were. But this time, instead of 125, 130 people in a boxcar, guess how many there was? 25. You figure it. Not only that, but a guard on each
train, each car?
Each car, they had two guards there. Why? Because you couldn't get out. The door was locked anyway. You couldn't, why? They had a little space for air. That's about it. And for the life of me, till this day, I could never understand, but they did have them. And we had to sit cross-legged, and like in rows of 25, I think, whatever it was. Yeah, because 25 on each side. And we were not allowed to talk. We were not allowed to breathe. We were not to do anything. No food, no water. We kept on going. And we came to Austria. And the reason we knew we were in Austria, we realized we were going westward, but we came outside Vienna, and even I, as a kid, I recognized the architecture of Vienna, the city. So we more or less surmised right away that we were in Austria. And the train stopped on a bridge. And then we figured, we were speculating, and now they're going to throw us into the river. And then we said, no, if they wanted to kill us, they would have done it there. Why would they bring us here? You argue with yourself, because you don't know. And anyway, so after a certain time, most likely it was a red light with hindsight, but we continued to our destination. We came to our destination. The train stopped alongside this huge mountain. And I mean, it was huge. And that was called, later on we found out on top of the mountain was a camp called Mauthausen. And they marched us up to the top of the camp. Now this was a camp because the mountain was built on a stone quarry. In fact, most of the people that were stationed there, they worked on a stone quarry, and that was the hardest work you could do, you could be assigned to. They had a way, they even had it, the museum does research. They had figured out that a person working in the mines to mine the stone, they could only last, even a healthy person I'm talking about, just so long, okay? In other words, they want to kill you, but they're not going to put you in the gas chamber. They would kill you by working you. And they even had coined a word for it. And the only way I could, translate it to English, is basically, it says bone grinder. That if they worked people the way they did, and they didn't feed you enough, that they really ground you into the ground. Basically, that's what they said. And they actually had coined a word for it. Could you believe it? And so basically, once we were in Mauthausen, And we came, by the way, to Mauthausen. And by the way, everything was built out of the stone, like the watchtowers, everything was like, it was very scary, let's put it this way. And over there, unlike, by the way, in Auschwitz, it was the spring of the year, it was cold, miserable. We had these thin clothes or striped clothes. It was shaking, was shivering, okay? And while we were there, I should have told you that before. Before we went to Mauthausen, when we were there, we saw the crematoriums, of course. And we found out where the crematorium was. And then one thing that's the reason I am backtracking a little bit. Then we saw this big fire, like the length of a football field, with high flames coming up, hot flames. And we were, by the way, by that time we were already, after the showers, they brought us up to a barrack. That's where we saw it. We saw the chimneys, and we saw these flames. And they were under a row of pine trees. And the flames were going up to almost the height of the pine trees, I swear. They were just so hot and high. And so we asked one of the capos that was there already, and what that fire is. He says, well, those are that's the transport last night that came in during the night. That means that our families already, they were up and they had a ditch under these trees, and they had used flammable fluid. They burned the bodies that they couldn't consume in the crematoriums. They just couldn't handle the volume. So they burned them in these pits. Can you imagine, this is one thing I want to stress, but I shouldn't mention, I am going to stress. Germany was considered the most enlightened, the most modern, the most advanced country in the world at the time. We looked up to Germany. And the fact that they're able to do this, till this day, I'd like somebody to explain it to me. How in the world does that happen in a civilized society? No matter how nasty they are, no matter what ideology they have. And that's exactly what they did. These were the same Germans that were kept on the pedestal all these years. They were looked up to, okay? So I would just like to make a point of that. Sometimes we don't think of that. But their culture was really the most advanced culture. There's nothing, nobody's going to argue about that. And they were capable of doing this. And this is something till this day, it really bothers me that people could be like this. That's why today I don't take anything for granted. When I see something that doesn't look good, I have antennas go up. Right away I say, this is only the beginning. And that's something we all have to remember. When you see something happen, like you have like here in the States, we live in a country that we always brag how great we are and all this. To me, I used to believe that too. But as I got older and I saw things more in realistic fashion, I am skeptical on everything. When something changes and something they pass a law they shouldn't, or they don't have to pass a law, but they do things they get away with, all of a sudden your antenna goes up. And I always maintain that this is something that we all have to be very conscious of, because we live in a world, you never know how your country could change. Yeah.
Marty, we're getting close to the end of our time, and you have so much more that you can tell us. Tell us, you were then sent to a subcamp called Melk to do unbelievably hard labor. Tell us about that, and then I know we're going to have to sort of fast forward to talk about liberation.
I'll just briefly tell you about Melk. Mauthausen had a lot of subcamps. Like I said, it was a big camp, and I was not stationed at Mauthausen. I was actually shipped out to Melk. They had a lot of subcamps. They had like, I knew about 40, but lately the museum said there were as many as 80, which I didn't know about. But anyway, Melk was not far from there, but we had to take a train to go to work. They shipped us to Melk. It's a small town. By the way, if you take a cruise on the Danube today, you pass Melk. And they have this beautiful, beautiful mountain with castles and churches and monasteries, all in this beautiful setting. I'm telling you, like a picture postcard. And that's where we were. But anyway, I was in Melk, and we were, the camp in Melk was not, the population was only about 13,000, okay? But all of us had assignments to certain work. one of the main jobs they had was building tunnels on this huge mountain a few miles away, okay? We had to take a train to get there. And this is what I ended up doing most of the time, digging tunnels under a mountain. But guess how we dug the tunnels? With picks and shovels. And we had to shovel mix the cement on the floor, on the ground, with the gravel and water and all that. And of course, carry the cement. I was too small to carry a bag of cement, so most of the time I didn't have to do it. But the point is, I had to dig and once you got to the place to work, you couldn't even straighten up. You had to stand there and dig and shovel and shovel. You couldn't stop for a minute. And this is the way you worked. So the labor was very, very hard.
In fact, I think you shared with me that in the winter months, hundreds of your fellow inmates died each week. And a fewer number in the summer.
Fewer number in the summer, right. We had a big number dying during the winter months, right. And one of the reasons I remember that clearly, too, that I could back it up, actually, is every single month, we were getting a replacement, because you have to remember, Hungary was shipping out thousands of people, okay? So there are plenty of people to replace those people. So Auschwitz was shipping to Austria, to Mauthausen, people constantly, but new people. And when they came to Mauthausen, some of them would be assigned to milk. And when they were milk, they ended up doing all kind of work like we did. But every single month, they brought 3,000 men to replace the 3,000 that died the month before. This was in the summer, the percentages were much different. It was much smaller. But the point is that's what it was.
But a constant stream.
Constant stream of 3,000 people every month came, and 3,000 to replace the people that perished the month before.
And you would continue working under those circumstances really until your liberation.
Right.
And when you were liberated in 1945, you were alone and you were 16 years old.
Right. When I was liberated, right, okay, but I had a lot of luck, actually, when I think of it. When I was, when I was in Mauthausen, the war was coming to an end, so they sent us on a march. Now they coined it as a forced march or death march, whatever you want to call it. And by that time, we were already, let me tell you, we were not just hungry or the word hungry I could repeat over and over, wouldn't even do it. We were starved to a point where we didn't get any food. And what we did get is, before when we worked, we used to get a piece of black bread once a day, okay? Which I found out later was made with a lot of sawdust, but that doesn't matter. But this time there was no bread. They gave us it was breadcrumbs. Literally, they put them to a grinder, okay? And they would take a ladle, the server would take a ladle and actually put it in the palm of our hands, literally. And this is the only meal you got for the day. Right? You had no place to save it. You couldn't. But more than that, I remember I looked in the palm of my hand on the breadcrumbs, that blue, green, and white mildew. Okay, and in spite of that, you just ate it. That's how bad things were. So we're told to go on a march. We're sent on a march, and we're going to a place. We ended up in a place called Gunskirchen. Now, but while we were on a march, like I say, everybody was very weak. Some people were weaker than others. And people would literally fall down. They couldn't get up. And there were guards, you have to remember, on both sides of the column. And the guard would just, without hesitating, would just take his rifle and just shoot them like he'd shoot a dog. That's it. No, nothing. In fact, I'll tell you one incident I am going to tell you. I don't want to take too much time. There was one incident I remember distinctly, still bothers me today. There was a potato on the ground, and one of the men, he was like next to me, and he saw the potato, he took a jump for the potato, And another guy from the other side saw the same potato. He took a leap for it from the other side. And guess what? They started fighting over potato, which you may think is bizarre, but it wasn't then, because the potato meant life, period. As they were fighting, it only took a couple of minutes, even that much. It just took like no time at all. The guard was right outside my column. He just picked up his rifle and shot one man right in the face, just like that. And that was already, the war was ending. They knew they lost the war a long time before that, by the way. They lost the war before I even went to Auschwitz. We knew they lost the war. They were retreating from the Russian front. I saw them retreat. The point is that the guard, and by the way, they were not SS. They were the ordinary army. They were supposed to be the good guys. Hello? I haven't seen any good guys, period. They were, to me, it didn't matter if he had an SS uniform or he had a Wehrmacht uniform. He did the same thing as the SS would have done. And to me, this is something to understand it, I still, like I said, I'll never will, that the Germans were so sophisticated, they were so advanced, and they were able to do this. The ordinary person was able to do that. And so this was, but anyway, we marched, we came to our destination, and this particular camp was called Gunskirchen. Now, again, my luck, I had a lucky strike. I came to Gunskirchen, there were about 15,000 men there, and a big place. We were like in such poor shape already, we were like basket cases. Never mind, we were not even living, we were like walking corpses. And don't you think, as soon as I got there, I don't remember how long it took. Out of 15,000 people, I ran into a cousin of mine. Now he was in a Hungarian, he was not in a concentration camp, he was in a Hungarian labor battalion. By the way, my brothers were in that too. All the Hungarian, I think, I'm not sure I mentioned it. I mentioned that to you before. They were used for slave labor. But when the Hungarians were retreating because the Russians were already in Hungary, for some reason they took them along with them and turned them over to the Gestapo, and they ended up in the camp I did it. 15,000 of them. And till this day, I could never understand it. As soon as I came there, out of all those people, I ran into him. Now, they were in fairly good condition compared to us. They didn't have it good, but they didn't have it anything like we did. We were not starved like we were and all that. So they were in pretty good shape yet. They had their own boots, their own clothes, they had some decent blankets, and we didn't have that. Now, till this day, I could never understand that, but the point is that I ran into my cousin, and he had a couple of friends. They were about the same age, from the same, the same group. And they were still, like I say, they were, ordinary 20, 23-year-old men, And I hooked up with them. And when we got liberated, I was with them. And so then we, again, to cut through the chase, one day we found out, we were told that the Germans took off, the guards took off. We didn't believe it because we didn't have a way of knowing that. So we spent an extra night. Some people did believe it and they left. We didn't believe it. We spent an extra night in camp to make sure that it was not a trap, that we'll go out the gate, there are machine guns waiting and the mow us down. That is the way we knew that this was their MO. So we stayed, next morning we went out looking for food. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but we went out looking for food, and by the way, it's a beautiful sunny day. And by the way, that I need sun, I remember it was like you just discovered it for the first time. It was the spring of the year. It was very, very nice. And we walked out of the camp, and we saw the American troops on the main road, and then we believed Americans were there. And we started looking for food. And again, I'm going to cut some down, but we came to this field, and there was this army truck in a ditch. And we looked inside the army truck, and there was a tub of lard on the front seat of the truck.
The tub of lard.
A tub of lard.
A tub of lard.
Yeah, just, white lard, all, ready to be used. And one of the guys, like I said, they were in pretty good shape, and he just took his fist, went right through the glass, all went into the lard. I know it sounds stupid because years later when I remember this, why didn't he go on the other side to break the window? Why did he do it on top of the lard? I could never understand it. And these guys were not dumb. I mean, they were just instinctively.
Desperate.
That was desperate. So anyway, so we took the lard on the grass, scooped out the glass, cleaned it up, but saved the lard. Okay? Okay, that was okay. Then we were about to walk away, and one of the guys said, let's look what's in the back of the truck. We looked at the back of the truck, and we found a bunch of leather hides, all refined already, ready to use. And boy, did we get excited. Each one of us rolled up whatever we could carry. I remember I couldn't carry too many, maybe 3 or so tops. They were already refined, but we knew you could use them for a coat or for shoes. And in Europe, the shoemakers knew how to make shoes from scratch, because I had boots made every year from scratch by the shoemaker. And so we got all excited, and we rolled up some of the hides. Each one of us took what we could carry, which was, in my case, it wasn't too many. And we noticed this farmhouse not far away. So we figured we'll walk up to the farmhouse, and we're looking for food. We still didn't eat, right? So we come up to the farmhouse, and I'm going to tell you something. I had such hatred for the Germans. I had such, you could cut it with a knife. It's beyond description that they were capable of doing what they did, okay? And we came to the house, and mind you, these were big guys, and guess what? They walked up to the door, they knocked on the door.
Of this German house.
This German house. Knocked on the door. Didn't just barge in. And the lady, she was home alone. She came up to the door. And I remember she opened the door, and I was shorter, so I could hardly see her, but I saw her face from the back. And she asked one of the guys what he wants. So he told her he would like some flour, some eggs, and some water. She went back in the kitchen, she brought the ingredients to the door, and gave it to him. And guess what we did? We never entered her house, never entered her kitchen. We could have just, years later, when I started talking about this, which took a long time for me, I spoke for the museum 5, 6 years before I remembered the story, and I always like to include it. What amazed me is that I didn't object. And I mean, he acted like this. We mixed up the ingredients, by the way. Oh, she had a barn in the backyard, and we saw in the front of the barn there was one of those iron kettles that you put a fire underneath and to heat up water. It was like used for the cows to heat up water for in the winter to throw some food in there. And but usually it's rusty, like in cowboy movies. You'll see kettles like this. The cowboys used to heat up water like this. Anyway. So we took this ingredient, he took those ingredients, mixed them up, and made dumplings. And
with the lard? With the lard.
The lard. We used the lard and the flour and the eggs and so on. And made dumplings, and that was our first meal. Oh, I remember, that was like real food. First time. But you see, again, I had a certain fifth sense. Don't ask me where I got it, but it's instinctive. To me, it was instinctive, and I just ate so many, 3 or 4 maybe, or something like that, and stop. Now, when you're hungry like this, I want you to understand, if somebody gave you a 4 or 5 pound loaf of bread, you would want to eat the whole thing at one time because you'll never see it again. So eat like a pig. That's what people, when are starving, that's what they do. It's a natural thing. But I only had 3 or 4, and I remember I stopped. What made me do it, I don't know, but I did. One of the guys, by the way, he had an uncle, he was older, he hooked up with us too. He ate a little too many, guess what? A day or 2 later, he did die because he couldn't tolerate the food.
Marty,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
at a point where we have to close the program,
Okay.
but if you don't mind, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, after what you just described, you went back to that German woman
Yeah.
and gave her your hides
Yeah.
as payment.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving you the flour and letting you use the...
Yeah, this is, to me, very important. Mm-hmm. We finished, and we really were content. You know, we had food, real food. One of the guys says, let's take some of the hides and give it to the woman and say thank you. Not one of us objected. And by the way, again, when I remember it, bothered me. Why didn't I object? Okay, don't get me wrong, my experience was much worse than theirs. Theirs was bad, but nothing compared to what I went through. But we didn't object. We did exactly what he suggested. We took some hides, each one donated a couple of hides, went to the door, knocked on the door, gave it to them and said thank you, and we walked away. Till this day, I could never understand why we were so civil. But then, after thinking it over, I had some satisfaction. And that was, and in spite that we didn't feel like human beings, we were so dehumanized, but we still had our upbringing, came back, still, we behaved the way we were raised.
Decently.
Was that right here?
Behave decently and in a civilized way.
Till this day, I could never figure it out. How come we were so behaved like that?
Marty, I wish we had several more hours because there's so much you couldn't even begin to tell us about. I'm going to turn back to Marty in just a moment to close our program. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remind you we'll have programs Wednesday and Thursday until August 9th. If you can't come back to another program, all of our programs are available on the museum's YouTube, and so we encourage you, if possible, to watch those. When Marty's done, Marty's going to go upstairs to the foyer, and he's going to be available to sign copies of Echoes of Memory. Because we didn't have a chance for you to ask Marty questions, that will be an opportunity also if you want to ask Marty a question, if you have one to ask of him. It's our tradition at First Person that our first person has the last word. And so on that note, I'll turn back to Marty to close our program.
Well, at this stage, I didn't prepare anything for this, I should have. But I would just like to leave you with one thing, that when you see somebody, in a case like this, something happened to one person, don't think that you're exempt, that it wouldn't happen to you. In other words, when somebody's going to pick on you and you know it's not right, especially the government, that it's just a matter of time that your turn will come too. In other words, nobody is exempt. And this is something that everybody has to understand. When I speak to students, I always point that out, that if somebody goes to work, he's a bully or something in school, he picks on her, eventually he'll get tired of her, he'll go pick on somebody else. And this is the way racists, or what do you call it, behave. And my only thing I could leave you with, that we don't realize that we are more responsible for each other than we think. As human beings, we are responsible for each other. It doesn't matter who you are. But his life is danger, her life may be in danger next. You never know who is going to be there. Everybody thinks they're exempt, but there comes a time that the circle runs out and everybody gets caught in a trap. There's one thing I would like to point out. Another thing is that we have to really look out for each other. That we, like I say, we can't very well discount other people because they are less educated, or they're a different race, or they came from the wrong country, or whatever you call it. People are basically the same, and I learned that. It takes time to learn, but we all have to learn it. And that you have to deal with people on an individual basis, because most people, I think, are nice, they're decent, but there are always some people that are not. But you can't allow those few people to sidetrack you and make you like that. Okay, and so one thing that I always tell the kids, so look out for each other and protect each other, because like I say, one danger to one person means there's danger going to be to the next person, sooner or later. It just works that way. In any society, by the way, in any society. The same thing, I'll even, I usually don't like to do this, but I'll bring up something during the 1950s. Some of you are too young, or maybe too young to remember. They had the McCarthy era. They were looking for communists under every corner, every rock. They were looking out for communists. And they ruined so many lives, okay, that you would not believe. Their livelihood, what do you call it? People don't realize this happened in the United States. So it could happen anywhere. You know, one thing I did learn, that I don't say, well, I used to think so too. Can't happen here, this is the United States. Things change, and things do change. And things just happen. And the whole thing is that when one group or one person is threatened, we are all threatened. And I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you.